Delegates, colleagues, sisters, and brothers, welcome to our 2016 annual meeting. And I would be remiss if I didn't start here. Our Canadian female Olympic athletes rock. And as Team Canada said in a tweet, dream realized, because we have our first 100-meter medal since 1996 with an amazing 9.91 second bronze medal run by Andre de Grasse, a Jamaican Canadian. Amazing run. I want to thank you all for being here, for agreeing to spend a week in downtown Toronto, the Sheraton Hotel. You know, you deserve your vacation time to relax, reflect, and recharge. But just like you've done, you demonstrated your commitment to our members all year. You're doing it once again by participating in this annual meeting, our democratic process. This has been a busy and challenging year, and I want to take the time to recognize and thank a few groups of people for their dedication and steadfast commitment to our members and to ETFO. And first and foremost, I want to thank the other 13 members of your provincial leadership team, including our General Secretary and our two Deputy General Secretaries, for their amazing dedication and commitment to our members this year. Thank you. And also, if I may, I want to recognize and thank all of our local presidents in the room. We could not do what we do without you. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. And this year, having gone through bargaining recently and thinking about how we function provincially and locally, I want to make special mention of an amazing group of ETFO members who are in fact the lifeblood of our federation. And I want to ask them to stand up so we can thank them. And that's the stewards, ETFO stewards. If you're an ETFO steward, will you stand up and be recognized, please? Thanks so much for everything you do and will do. And we'll call on you again, I'm positive. And I'd like to ask those who are first-time delegates to an ETFO annual meeting to stand up and be recognized. And thanks for being here. Friends, I want to take a minute to recognize briefly our General Secretary, Victoria Rhéaume. Over the course of this week, we'll have many opportunities, especially at our dinner on Wednesday, to recognize Victoria, who you may know is leaving us after 3 amazing years at the end of this month. So I want to thank Victoria for all of her service, her dedication, and please join me in thanking her for the first of many times that we'll do that this week. And I also want to recognize Sharon O'Halloran, who as of September the 1st will be our new ETFO General Secretary. Sharon. Thanks. The business that we'll conduct this week is the very foundation of our federation, and it is so important in charting our path forward. The democratic decisions made here that we will make here together, and the recommendations put forward by our local leaders at Representative Council throughout the year are key in guiding us in everything that we do. You know, I want to highlight that since May 2015, 52 recommendations were made to the executive through our Representative Council, and I'm pleased to say to you that that executive listens, and I'm pleased to report that 96% or 50 of those 52 recommendations were adopted or are in the process of being implemented by the provincial executive. I want to cover a few different areas in my time here. And I want to begin by attempting to highlight some of the amazing work that has taken place this year. But before I start that, I want to thank each and every one of our staff in all 5 of our service areas across every level of our organization for their dedicated and amazing work that they make possible, that makes our successes possible. Thank you. My friends, ETFO is one of the best providers of professional learning for educators in Canada. This year, like every year, there were hundreds of professional learning opportunities for our members through conferences, workshops, seminars, and AQ courses. And in fact, in the spring, we set a new ETFO AQ record with 2,445 of our members taking courses. Every July and August, I am so impressed by the thousands of ETFO members who participate in our summer academy across the province. This year, we offered 85 courses, and right up until last week, and again this week, I understand, every room in our ETFO home was filled with members participating in Summer Academy and Reflections on Practice. Whether it's our Sisters in the Struggle program, Union School, the new CB Academy, our And Still We Rise conference, the Why Poverty workshop, our virtual academy for local leaders, Learning Math in the Early Years conference, or our 12 ETFO-related websites, we do some phenomenal work. I'm so very proud that at our last annual meeting, delegates adopted the recommendations from the Truth and Reconciliation Committee. And I'm just as proud of the important work we've done since then related to FNMI issues. For example, ETFO hosted 2 amazing webinars on residential schools and reconciliation this year and implemented a new program on deconstructing stereotypes and the brochure, What Have You Heard? An Introduction to Indigenous Peoples of Canada. And we held for the first time ever a 2-day workshop and a sharing circle for our FNMI members. I'm proud that we continued to expand our commitment to equity and social justice, but we all know that that work will never end. We implemented ETFO's new transgender policy and launched our LGBTQ Inclusive School Place Starts Here video. Workshop and resources for that featuring a number of very courageous LGBTQ members. That pride was matched as we push forward with our work on white privilege. At our February Representative Council meeting, activist Desmond Cole urged our local and provincial leadership to actively challenge the impact of systemic racism and white privilege in our schools and our communities. In April, we held the first ETFO Challenging Oppression Conference for racialized members, and I'm proud to report that at our June meeting, the executive approved an annual two-day racialized members networking conference that will begin in 2017 and 18. You feel free to clap at any time you want. Keep me on track. But listen, last but not least, we should all be proud that in early July, shortly after the Pride Parade in Toronto, your provincial executive voted unanimously in favor of publicly supporting Black Lives Matters and their fight for equity, equality, and basic human rights. Delegates, we all know how very important it is for us, both at the local and the provincial level, to expand and strengthen our connections and with community partners, and to be directly involved in those issues that will move our society forward in a progressive way. Over the course of this past year, we have done just that. Early in the year, we were all confronted with the terrible situation facing tens of thousands of Syrian families forced to flee their country. And ETFO, you and I collectively, stepped up to help. ETFO donated $80,000 for Syrian relief efforts, with locals across the province donating an additional $33,700. Amazing. We supported the Canadian Council of Refugees, Oxfam Canada, the Canadian Red Cross, and worked very closely with the CLC at a national level. Of course, many of the refugees who came to Ontario are now in our schools. And it was amazing to see our local workshops all across the province designed to assist our members to identify and support the learning needs of these new members of our Canadian community. And then we all watched as fire swept through Fort McMurray in Alberta. Once again, without hesitation, together we acted. The ETFO executive adopted a representative council recommendation to donate $50,000 to the relief effort and to match local donations up to an additional $50,000. Again, locals were quick to contribute and to step up to the plate by contributing more than $78,000. And at the end of the day, with the Rep Council motions together, we donated just over $178,000 to help those people in Fort McMurray. That's why I'm proud, one of the reasons I'm proud to be president of this union. Colleagues, I don't want to tell you on reaching out to our community partners, I don't have to tell you about the infrastructure deficit that has plagued our schools for years. But due to the efforts of an unrelenting group of parent activists, advances have been made to make sure the government understands that at the heart of any infrastructure investment strategy must be our public schools. ETFO reached out to this parent-led group, Fix Our Schools, and endorsed their efforts to help ensure further investment in safe, accessible, and appropriate learning spaces. This parent group played a huge role in pushing the government to pledge more than $2 billion in new funding over the next 2 years. We all know that these new funds will help, but considering there is still a $15 billion repair backlog, there is much more for us to do with Fix Our Schools. We were on the ground recently supporting dedicated parents who protested across the province when the Ontario government tried to cut off funding for intensive therapy for children with autism 5 years and older. We know, and the parents of children with autism know, that autism does not end at 5, and continued support is absolutely critical. Those parents and supporters mobilized and would not for 1 minute, leave the government alone. And as a result, the much-needed funding will continue, and we were proud to be a part of that movement. My friends, mental illness is something we all need to think about and deal with. Well, I understand how much ETFO members are always thinking about your students, their students. It's also so very important for us to think about each other and, frankly, to take care of each other together. Some of you may be familiar with the sports broadcaster Michael Landsberg and his very public struggle with depression and anxiety. What came of that public discussion was Sick, Not Weak, a campaign that focuses on ending the stigma attached to mental illness and creating supportive communities so that anyone suffering knows they are not alone. Michael was invited to speak in our Ottawa Carleton local and in Waterloo. And I know he left quite the impression on members in those locals because I attended both sessions and my heart was touched by what he shared. Your executive has endorsed Sick Not Weak, and we have started an exciting long-term partnership with Michael and his team because together we need to do whatever we can to eliminate the stigma associated with mental illness and openly support each other. Sisters and brothers, our important work in the labor movement at the provincial, national, and international level continues. I want to start by wishing our Unifor sister and brothers all the best in their negotiations in this very hotel, and you'll see many of them in the lobbies and in the elevator as they're negotiating. And they're negotiating with the big three automakers. And I applaud them for being very clear right up front that there will be no deal with GM or any other unless there is a commitment to invest in the GM Oshawa plan and in the members of Unifor Local 222. And you know what? They've said it and I want to say it. Canada did not invest in GM so that they could take union jobs, destroy union families so that they can get a cheaper deal somewhere else like Mexico. Should not be happening. And we stand with our brothers, and I've walked the line with our sisters and brothers in CUPE Local 2974 Essex County Library workers who have taken a real stand for a fair deal. 58 members in that local, 12 of them are full-time, and the Essex County Council is going after their sick leave, trying to strip their rights in their sick leave. I say shame on the Essex County Council. You know, not too long ago, the Prime Minister said that it's 2016, and gender and pay equity need to be a reality. Well, he needs to go and sit down with the management team at Canada Post and reinforce this message as our Cup W sisters and brothers are in the fight of their lives trying to negotiate a fair deal which would include and should include pay equity for women. Look, ETFO joined the global movement as you know, to protect teachers in Turkey and the teacher union and their members in Ecuador. And we called on the Mexican government to demand an end to the attacks and the appalling killing of teachers in that country as they demonstrated their democratic rights. And I want to give a big shout out to our Durham teacher local for organizing a protest at the Mexican consulate here in Toronto to highlight those appalling atrocities. I'm looking forward to welcoming the OFL's new president, Chris Buckley, later this evening, and he will no doubt, I'm sure, talk about the very important work of the OFL and the labor movement in Ontario. But I want to briefly touch on some of that work. The province is in the middle of a historic review of labor law in this province. And this review provides a once-in-a-generation opportunity to make real, long-lasting improvements for some 7 million workers in Ontario. An opportunity for this government to address unstable, precarious work. It's been 20 years since Ontario's labor laws were reviewed, but through this process, the Changing Workplaces Review, we have a springboard, as Chris has said, for employment reforms. A chance to eliminate current barriers to workers who want to choose union membership, prevent employer intimidation and harassment, and help secure collective agreements and resolve disputes, maintain union protection with service providers when service providers are flipped. Additionally, the recommendations in that interim report will ensure equal pay, benefits and conditions for all workers regardless of their part-time, temporary, or full-time status. Paid sick days and vacation days in keeping with international standards and proactive enforcement of employment standards. And just as important, we need, through this process, a $15 an hour minimum wage in this province, and we need it now. ETFO, I know that many of our locals have committed to working as we have with the OFL and our sisters and brothers in the labor movement on both of these critical issues. And I ask that you set aside Saturday, October the 1st, as we will be calling on ETFO members and our local leaders to join in support of the OFL's Decent Work, Make It Fair campaign here in Toronto. But you know, when we're talking about the conditions of work in this province and workers who are not in this room right now, and making it fair for everyone and fighting for rights, I'm compelled, I'm absolutely compelled as your president and as a unionist to mention recent developments at the Ontario Teachers' Pension Plan. My friends, I understand, we all understand, that OTPP is an independent organization. But I can't stand by, we can't stand by, and we will not, while 38 secure unionized OPSEU jobs are eliminated and their work shipped overseas. Shame is right. Our OTF table officer, Diane Dewing, will speak to this issue in her presentation, but I want you to know that we are working closely with OPSEU President Smokey Thomas and local President Jeff Ballard to resolve this situation. So Diane will pick it up, but I want to simply end by saying this. Shame. Shame on OTPP for even considering sending union jobs and union work offshore. I want to turn now to collective bargaining. Our last round of negotiations, the first round under Bill 122, was an extremely challenging process for everyone. But because of the dedicated work of our provincial team, the amazing collective efforts of our unwavering solidarity of our local leaders and members, we were able to get an overwhelming ratification vote for both of our central agreements. And over the past several months, ETFO undertook one of the most comprehensive, most inclusive reviews of our 2014 round of collective bargaining. I want to thank all presidents and chief negotiators who participated in this debrief and at the collective bargaining conference in March. Also, thanks to all of our members who filled out the online survey that was earlier this year as well. Your experience and your insight is so valuable to ensuring we continue to improve everything we do related to collective bargaining. I want you to know that in our initial discussions in June, your provincial executive passed 14 recommendations based on that feedback in that debrief and 3 additional key recommendations just yesterday to ensure that these kinds of constructive, collective efforts make us stronger as we prepare for the next round. Sisters and brothers, on behalf of the provincial executive, I want you to know that we will explore all options leading up to the next round of bargaining to ensure that we put in place a more inclusive and open process that will allow us to achieve our provincial goals while protecting local autonomy and local negotiations. You know, we all work very hard throughout the course of a year for our members and for publicly funded public education. But one thing I think I know that we don't do enough of is celebrate. We do not take enough time to celebrate our successes. So I want to spend just a few minutes celebrating some of our successes with you. We need to celebrate the fact that for the first time ever, we were able to have professional judgment defined and recognized in our central agreement. And there is a lot of work. Now that that is defined, we need to do everything we can to ensure that our members are implementing and using their professional judgment, and we need to protect their right to be able to implement and use their professional judgment. And as we support our members on specific questions of assessment, we're directing them to our ETFO assessment website at etfoassessment.ca. And we should also celebrate that due to the hard work of one of our central agreement committees and some key staff members, we now have PPM 159 from the Ministry on Collaborative Professionalism. This policy memorandum sets out a vision for the development of a more collaborative culture in Ontario education at all levels, including ministry boards and schools. It outlines a commitment that at all levels within the education sector that we will all work together in an attempt to transform the system and value all voices. It will foster consultation, collaboration, and communication with Federation and other union locals and association for the implementation of new and existing initiatives. With this, ETFO and our local leaders will be a strong voice at all tables to guide that process. Let's celebrate. Let's celebrate the fact that several months ago, the government was prepared to implement an addendum to growing success and the new FDK report card. And they were going to do that in September. They were going to do that with no time, no PD support, or support for our FDK teams. But our committee members, and again, our amazing staff, worked diligently with other stakeholders to change this. The result, the implementation of that addendum and the report card will take place in January instead of September. All kindergarten teams will receive a half-day PD of focused professional learning and a further half-day of release time in the fall. All kindergarten team members will receive hard copies of both documents later this month or early September. There'll be regional sessions in the fall for the board early years teams, and the ministry is creating further support documents for all board early year teams. You know, I'm going to say this openly. I don't know how this happens to me. It happened to me at Rep Council twice. This is not my final version of the speech, and I'm trying to make it through here. But listen, there's something that we need to, in addition to all of that, that we need to celebrate together. And that's the Ontario Supreme Court ruling on Bill 115. As my daughter would say, right back at you. Listen, our collective, you know, the reason that happened is because of our collective strength. Your unwavering solidarity was key to winning one of the most precedent-setting court decisions on union rights. In April, with that decision, the Ontario Superior Court of Justice confirmed that Bill 115 violated our right to free and fair collective bargaining. And I just want to go through some of this. The judge stated, Ontario, on its own, devised a process. It set the parameters which would allow it to meet fiscal restraints it determined, and then set a program which limited the ability of the other parties to take part in a meaningful way. Wow. We discovered that in the first 30 minutes of the only meeting we had with them at the very beginning of that process. The government's process, he went on, for collective bargaining was fundamentally flawed from the start and ran over the rights of the employees. Us, we knew that too. The threat and passage of the Putting Students First Act served to show that there was substantial interference with the process of collective bargaining, such that there was a breach of the freedom of association in Ontario. Or, if you want, we won, they were wrong, and we were right. But listen, sisters and brothers, the court also directed the government to negotiate with us and others for that violation, and we have started that process informally. And soon after this annual meeting, we will ensure, and we need to, that our members are brought into the loop on that process. But I want you to know that another step, the executive passed a motion yesterday to hold the Presidents and Chief Negotiators meeting on September the 20th to have a fulsome and inclusive discussion on the issue of remedy. You know, whether in the courts or schools, at the ballot box, or in the streets, my friends, together, we will always defend our rights. In closing, I want you to know that we still You know, we still have a provincial government that is determined, it seems, to balance the budget through austerity measures. Time and again, it has been demonstrated, and we know that austerity agendas do not work for workers and communities, and this austerity agenda must end. Our challenge together is to use our strength as a union, to use the connections each and every one of us has in our communities to continue to counter that austerity agenda. You know, we have the rare privilege to influence the future as educators, which we do every day, you do every day in your classrooms. And we can do this too in our communities, and we must, working with others who share our vision of a better future, a progressive future, a future where children have the support and education that they deserve. As ETFO made clear in the winter pre-budget hearings, the education funding formula must be fixed. While there's been funding for new initiatives like full-day kindergarten, money lost 2 decades ago during the Harris government has yet to be replaced in certain areas within that formula. The shame is right. The current government promised a review of that education formula in 2010. Well, guess what? It's 2016 and still no review. We need to, and we will, hold this government accountable and to that promise. You know, and I know that education is not an expense. It's one of the most important investments any government can make, and if they want to know where to make those investments, they need only turn to our Building Better Schools plan. Sisters and brothers, we must continue our great work. We must continue to build our internal capacity and continue to work to build bridges and solidify our outreach efforts with allies around us. Because we know that we cannot build and protect one of the greatest publicly funded public education systems in the world without a grassroots movement. And as we work together over the next few days on behalf of our 78,000 members, let's remember that although we may have different positions on important items, the many things, the numerous things that bind us together as a union, as a family, are so much stronger. I urge you to be a part of, to continue to be a part of ETFO's collective strength as we push forward together for change, and have an amazing annual meeting, and thank you.